All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Morbid Symptoms, Notes from the Interregnum. I'm Tara Van Dyke, and I hope you can hear me. Been having some technical problems this week, so I'm hoping everything is in order. Mark, let me know if you can't hear me, because I'm paranoid now. Anyway, hi, everyone. Tonight, I want to talk about MAGA as reverse perestroika. Do we have a President Trumpachev or Gorbachev here? And I cannot take responsibility for this analogy. It can't, at least the person I know of who came up with it was a guy named Michael Avery, or no, not Avery, Every. And he's a financial global strategist or something like that. We'll see in a minute, from Robobank. But I came across it and I thought it was, I was like, oh, that's it. It's funny, and it's also, I think, a useful analogy, because a lot of it, with all the craziness that's going on, and sometimes it seems that there's no method to Trump's madness, or it's just, craziness, or whoever he's talked to last, or Israel, or Epstein, or I guess now also Satan, all kinds of white supremacy, all kinds of skeleton key heuristics or whatever to try to figure out why Trump and those around him are doing what they're doing. And I thought one thing that's useful with this reverse perestroika is that it helps to see the possible how what they're doing is more than the sum of its parts, and it's not just totally random, and also points to beyond the players or the personalities involved, the more deeper structural dynamics within global capitalism and the U.S. political economy that would require drastic changes, because there's various crises going on. And anyway, so I want to talk about that, but I want to so let's see. I want to briefly go over what Every's notion is of why he thinks it's useful to consider MAGA and Trump as a reverse perestroika. But so I briefly introduce his analogy, and then I want to delve into, I want to look at David Harvey's New Imperialism. And David Harvey, for those who don't know, he's like 92 now. But anyway, he's really well known in geography. I think he's the most cited geographer, one of the most cited social scientists ever. And he's a Marxist geographer, economist, etc. And he's been really, to use an old word, seminal in economic geography, looking at the spatiality and the geography of capitalism and how they interact, how space and spatial production and uneven geography, the development and capitalization of uneven geography is part and parcel of capitalism. And what I found is that I happened upon, I was looking at his book, The New Imperialism, which I think was written I think it came out in 2003. So it must have been, he was working on that in 2002. And I think it's a collection of lectures, actually. But I found it really apropos of what's going on right now, because what he uses, you can see that's George W. Bush walking down a long hallway, probably after, I don't know, saying that after declaring war on Saddam Hussein, or who knows, but I can't remember what big speech that was. But at the time he was working on this book, there's a lot of turmoil going on about what's going on with this, with the war in Iraq. And there's a lot of similarities between trying to figure out like what's going on with that and what's going on with Trump, the Trump administration going to war with Iran. And his thing was that a lot of the ideas that, it's just oil, or that was the big one, right? That it's just a war for oil. That's all it is. And he wanted to look at, well, is there other things? Is there other explanation? Or if we look at the kind of that he would call what is it, the historical geographical materialism approach to capitalism? Can we get a better idea, a better concept, more clarity about what's going on, and of course, how to react to it. So this is what I want to do. So I'm going to go. Let's see. Sorry, let me get my ducks in a row here. It's been a bit of a crazy day. Okay, so for anybody who's paying attention on, especially on social media, but probably also on regular media, that when people are looking at trying to understand what Trump is doing or what the Trump administration is doing in Iran, no one's buying the official story, and the official story keeps on changing about why why we have to go to war with Iran again. And so of course oil's there, but that's kind of in the background. One of the big ones now is that it's a war for Israel. Israel either has some dirt on Trump and the Trump administration or everybody because of Epstein gate, and they're using that, and that is why that Trump is doing this, or he's just being led around by the nose by Israel, all this stuff. Or of course, so then there's the Israel focus, there's the Epstein gate focus, which of course is related to Israel. And then there's on a side note, the idea that it's about China, it's about checking China because China gets a lot of oil, or a certain amount of its oil, from Iran. And so that's actually also in the mix. So it's about checking China because there's only really two poles. There's the US pole that's having a hard time declining, lots of people would think, and acting erratically on its decline. It's not going quietly into that sweet night. And then, of course, China is rising, particularly economically. There's no doubt about that. But so far has either because, for whatever reason, has not wanted to exert itself militarily. And some people think that what part of what's going on with Venezuela and now with Iran is that the U.S. is trying to push China into reacting militarily. So far, China is not interested in any kind of hot war, maybe the Cold War 2.0 going, or that's pretty hot at the moment. Anyway, so that's what I want to do. I want to first introduce Michael Every's. I want to call him Every, but it's Avery, or it's Every. Sorry. One day I'll be able to talk. So he works for Rabobank. What is he? He's a senior global strategist. So this is a report that obviously his target audience is investors and business class, right? So people who are own and operating businesses, or investors, or both. And so that's who his target audience is for these reports. And this one is called President Trumpachev Go Rump, Trump's Reverse Perestroika. And this came out, I think, was published on Rabobank's page. Oh, I don't know. I think in January, maybe. So it was before this, before the Iran war. Yeah, wanted to say Iraq, obviously. Iran war kicked off. So let me I want to get the regular thing on here now. Can I see this? Sorry. So here's Gorbachev. So for those of you who don't remember, Perestroika and Glasnost. So when Gorbachev became the leader of the Soviet Union, I guess apparently there was a realization they had to make some changes. And so Glasnost was openness, so more freedom to to say what you want in the Soviet Union, and Perestroika was to change the economy to add reforms, to add some market mechanisms and some into their at that point, I guess, completely command economy. And as we know, I don't want to get into too much history about that because I want to focus on the reverse perestroika aspect of that, and to see what you guys think about it, if that's a possible explanation, a possible method to the seeming madness to what's going on with the Trump administration, that it's not just incompetence or corruption or blackmail or Satan or anything else. Those could be part of it, but that it's actually there's structural reasons that are pushing or manifesting reasons that are pushing the Trump administration to make drastic changes. And that's not to say that these changes are the only changes that could be made, or they're making them in any artful way, or their political communication about them is particularly straightforward. But that whoever was in, whoever had the presidency would be forced with economic problems, political economic problems that they would have to deal with, and would have to make a decision. Do you want to maintain your hegemony? Do you want to be the biggest bloc of the economic and political blocs that are emerging, or do you just want to kind of retire and turn over that hegemon or partial hegemon or regional hegemon role to somebody else? That drastic changes would be happening to the economy, to the political economy, one way or another. Anywho, so what does Michael Avery have to say? So let me pull this up. Add to stage, yes. Sorry, I'm trying to, that's weird. Sorry, something weird's going on. Add to stage. Oh, here we go. Okay, let me make this a bit bigger. So just let me hold on a second. Need to go over here and zoom. Zoom. Let's see how that looks. Maybe I'll zoom a bit more. I thought I had this sorted out. That should be, let me see what you guys see. Okay, so before getting into the Harvey of it all, the historical geographic materialism of capitalism of it all, let's see what our senior global strategist from Robobank has to say, at least initially. Okay, so summary. So the summary of his argument is that markets are bewildered by the ongoing revolution rolling out from the U.S. Beyond underlining that this is an economic statecraft, not policy, historical analogies may be of help. On this basis, we argue for a close comparison between U.S. President Trump and former Soviet President Gorbachev. Gorbachev tried to reform the Soviet system from capital investment and military production towards consumption, but failed, while more radical reforms were a catastrophe. Trump is trying to shift the U.S. system from consumption and financialization to capital investment and military production. So what he means by capital investment is like productive capacity, right? So we want to shift. So for quite a while, but particularly since the 1980s, there's been a shift towards from production side of the economy to consumption, and of course from also production to financialization. And also Walmarts have been doing quite well, but mom and pop merchants have not. And to even ramp up even more military production. Hence I think it was a few weeks ago when Trump said he wanted to go from 1 trillion to 1.5 trillion military budget. Anyway, so in his second term, this is also entailing radical changes. The risk of failure is again evident, and the liberal world is already crumbling. However, Trump's reverse perestroika could arguably also succeed. We map out showing which geopolitical economy structures need to change, if so. So before we go on to looking through what he thinks this reverse perestroika consists of, and what the possible bottlenecks, risks, and success could look like, I want to now go to David Harvey's understanding of capitalist imperialism and the spatial fix to capitalism's regular, or I don't know, a cyclical over accumulation crises, which is that you have too much capital. You have capital and labor that can't be put together profitably or profitably enough. So what do you do about that? Okay. So let me go back here. Remove. Remove. Let's see. Oh, good. Mark can hear me loud and clear. Thank you, Mark. Backstage Patreon. Okay. So sorry. Add to stage. Okay. So, David Harvey, Capitalist-Imperialism and the Spatial Fix. So I'm going to make the argument that that it's useful to look at what Every is talking about in terms of the reverse perestroika, in terms of a capitalist-imperialist spatial fix. So let me go into what Harvey means by that, and then we'll take these concepts, and then we'll have that in mind while we go over the rest of Michael Every's understanding of the reverse of Trump's possible reverse perestroika. All right. So again, what that means is that Gorbachev, just focusing on the economic side, wanted to go from a focus on investing in the productive capacity, in particular of heavy industry, and low consumption, to consumption, to more of a focus on consumption. And what he's saying is that it's a reverse perestroika because Trump and co is trying to do the reverse. Not, of course, going from a quote unquote free market economy to a complete command economy, but more command, more mix, more heavy hand of the state, or a different hand of the state than we've seen since the 80s in particular, perhaps, since who knows when, maybe there'll be more state than ever before. We don't know. And of course, just because there's more state doesn't mean that it's particularly, that could be good, bad, or indifferent. So far, it's, a mixed bag, to say the least, and depends a lot on what your relationship is to the global economy. If you're which sector you're in, and what part of the labor force you're in, and if you're in the line of fire right now in West Asia. Okay, so David Harvey. And what's interesting is I want to share this because, again, he was the impetus of this book, or maybe he just used what was going on in 2002 and 2003 with the war in Iraq and the war on terror and all that stuff, and the axis of evil and the new American century, or the American century coming back from the dead. Maybe use as an impetus to again reiterate his theory of the significance of geography, or the geographical aspects, the geographical dynamic of capitalism, and how it changes and why it matters. But here's just a couple of things that he was talking about, and when he was talking about trying to figure out what was going on in what sense to make out of what the Bush administration was doing. And here's one part. It says the hubristic view. So the potentiality for stabilization of the whole region, stretching from Pakistan to Egypt, is considerable. Again, this is he's writing in 2002, 2003. The hubristic view that the whole structure of political power and territorial organization in the region, so arbitrarily created by the British and the French as a sidebar to the Versailles Agreement, can be remade and stabilized under leadership of the U.S. and its allies, is simply too far-fetched to contemplate, though there are strategists within the U.S. government who seem to believe this is possible. This is the American century people, Wolfowitz, and all those cast of characters, Rumsfeld, several others. Some are still with us. The U.S. invasion of Iraq then takes on an even broader meaning. Not only does it constitute an attempt to control the global oil spigot, and hence the global economy, through domination over the Middle East, it also constitutes a powerful U.S. military bridgehead on the Eurasian landmass. which taken together with its gathering alliances from Poland down through the Balkans, yields a powerful geostrategic position in Eurasia, with at least the potentiality to disrupt any consolidation of Eurasian power that could indeed be the next step in the endless accumulation of political power that must always accompany the endless accumulation of capital. So here's his connection between capitalist imperialism that we're going to flesh out more. But the two aren't the same, but they need each other. Okay, so this is Harvey's definition of capitalist imperialism. So imperialism is a word that trips easily off the tongue, still to today, maybe even more so today, but it has such different meanings that it's difficult to use it without clarification as an analytic rather than a polemical term. I here define that specific brand of it called capitalist imperialism as a contradictory fusion of the politics of state and empire. Imperialism as a distinctly political project on the part of actors whose power is based in command of territory and a capacity to mobilize its human and natural resources towards particular political, economic, and military ends. And the molecular process of capital accumulation in space and time. So imperialism as a diffuse political economic process in space and time in which command over and use of capital takes primacy. So with the former, I want to stress. So with the former, that's the capitalist. With the former, I want to stress the political, diplomatic, and military strategies invoked and used by the state or some collection of states operating as a political power bloc, as it struggles to assert its interest and to achieve its goals in the world at large. With the latter, I focus on the ways in which economic power flows across and through continuous space towards or away from territorial entities, such as states or regional blocs, through the daily practices of production, trade, commerce, capital flows, money transfers, labor migration, technology transfer, currency speculation, flows of information, cultural impulses, and the like. So it's a lot more than just capital versus labor, and it's a lot, and which is an important but blunt binary, or profit. Those are obviously, of course, key, but lots of other components go into that to making that possible. So what Origari refers to as the territorial and the capitalist logics of power are rather different from each other. To begin with, the motivations and interests of agents differ. The capitalist holding money capital will wish to put it to whatever profits can be had and typically seeks to accumulate more capital. Politicians and statesmen, women, typically seek outcomes that sustain or augment the power of their own state vis-a-vis other states. The capitalists seek individual advantage, and though usually constrained by law, is responsible to no one other than his or her immediate social circle, while the statesman seeks a collective advantage and is constrained by the political and military situation of the state, and is in some sense or another responsible to a citizenry, or more often to an elite group, class, or kinship structure, or some other social group. The capitalist operates in a continuous space and time, whereas the politician operates in a territorialized space. So, for example, if we hear about the transnational class or international capital, of course, their geography and their terrain of interest is different than the representative or bureaucrat from a nation state or city state, etc. So let's see. On the other hand, the capitalist operates the politician operates in a territorialized space, and at least in democracies, in a temporality dictated by the electoral cycle. On the other hand, capitalist firms come and go, shift locations, merge or go out of business, but states are long-lived entities, cannot migrate, and are, except under exceptional circumstances of geographical conquest, confined, so Greater Israel, confined within a fixed territorial boundaries. So what he's getting at is that the capitalist logic and the imperialist logic are intertwined, but they're not the same. And so a lot goes on, of course, on the capitalist side, trying to get the state to do what it wants, and the state trying to get the capitalists or a section of capitalists to do what it wants them to do, to kind of get this a structured coherence or a harmonization to the extent possible of these interests. Okay, so the capitalist-imperialist dialectic. So not a surprise here that since Harvey is coming out of the Marxist tradition and is particularly fond of applying and elaborating his understanding of Marx's method, he tries to think dialectically, and his terms are off. His set of terms are often dialectically intertwined. What does that mean? Another word we hear a lot, but may not always know what people mean by it. So let's see. It would be hard to make sense of the Vietnam War or the invasion of Iraq, for example, or the Iran War, or the Americans or the Israeli-American relationship, solely in the terms of immediate requirements of a capital accumulation. Indeed, a plausible case can be made that such ventures inhibit rather than enhance the fortunes of certain capital. And I should say this also, that it's important to distinguish. Oftentimes, when he's talking about things at a macro, longue durée type of level. So there's a difference, of course, between capital and labor as such, and the category, and particular labor and particular capital. Yeah. So there's a difference if you're the state, and you're at least the theory of the state is that it has capitalists and sectors of labor that it focuses on, that it chooses for better or worse. But it's also supposed to be looking over the reproduction of society, reproduction of capital as a whole. Yeah. So sometimes it may have to upset certain capitalists, certain regions, certain sectors, also on the labor side, in order to keep the capital as such, capital accumulation, and the relations that need to be, the institutions and relations that need to be reproduced for that to go on in order. Yeah, so that's another thing to keep in mind. So let's see. By the same token, it would be hard to make sense of the general territorial strategy of containment of Soviet power by the United States after the Second World War, the strategy that set the stage for U.S. intervention in Vietnam, without recognizing the compelling need felt on part of the business interests in the United States to keep as much of the world as possible open to capital accumulation through the expansion of trade, commerce, and opportunities for foreign investment. The relation between these two logics should be seen, therefore, as problematic and often contradictory, that is, dialectical, rather than as functional or one-sided. So the dialectical relation sets the stage for an analysis. Here comes his approach that I want us to keep in mind, or I want to keep in mind when I'm going over Michael Every's reverse perestroika analogy. Is that the relation sets the stage for the analysis of capitalist imperialism in terms of the intersection of these two distinct but intertwined logics of power. The difficulty for concrete analyses of actual situations is to keep the two sides of this dialectic simultaneously in motion, and not to lapse into either a solely political or predominantly economic mode of argumentation. So, okay. A little bit more on this before we go to reverse perestroika. So this is all from Harvey's 2003, I think it was published in 2003 book, The New Imperialism, and its concrete case was the Iraq War, George W. Bush administration's invasion of Iraq after 9/11, or a little while after. So imperialist practices from the perspective of capitalist logic, so capital accumulation profit, are typically about exploiting the uneven geographical conditions under which capital accumulation occurs, and also taking advantage of what I call asymmetries that inevitably arise out of spatial exchange relations. These get expressed through unfair and unequal exchange, spatially articulated monopoly powers, extortionate practices attached to restricted capital flows, and the extraction of monopoly rents. The equality condition usually presumed in perfectly functioning markets is violated, and the inequalities that result take on a specific spatial and geographic expression. The wealth and well-being of particular territories are augmented at the expense of others. And we can see this all the time, especially if you look at value chains or production change. So, and the easiest example, since I'm looking at, guiltily looking at my smartphone here, is that even though we don't, when we just, at least where I live, the costs, the environmental costs of getting the materials together to put the iPhones together, particularly the rare earth metals and how those are mined in places like Congo, but not only in the Congo, that you can see that that there's an uneven geography to the costs and the benefits and the enjoyments of our digital devices, and that's just one thing. Okay. Uneven geographical conditions do not merely arise out of the uneven patterning of natural resource endowments and locational advantages, but even more importantly, are produced by the uneven ways in which wealth and power themselves become highly concentrated in certain places. So, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, City of London, Hong Kong, part of Hong Kong, the initial special economic zones in China when they started the opening up and opening up and reform and opening up. Yes. Dubai, although Dubai is having a hard time this week, etc. All right. So let's see. Produce. Yes. By virtue of asymmetrical exchange relations. It is here that the political dimension re-enters the picture. One of the state's key tasks is to try to preserve the pattern of asymmetries in exchange over space that works to its own advantage. Okay, so if we think about just to keep in mind, if we have, let's think about the Belt and Road Initiative of China, and then the other corridors and initiatives that everyone, the quote unquote pivot to Asia that they've been talking about since Obama. That if we think about, I'll just use Iran and the Middle East, West Asia, if you prefer, as an example. That of course the U.S. does not wants to have as much, at least historically, and I would assume going forward, or what are they doing, as much control over over the Middle East, for obvious reasons, because of oil, natural gas, and the shipping lanes. Yeah, so they would be remiss, or at least the department do not want to give that up or share too much of that, at least not on their own, at least, or only share on their own, on the terms that they decide with China, or in particular. All right. So one of the key, for example, the U.S. forces open capital markets around the world through the operations of the IMF and the WTO is because specific advantages are thought to accrue to U.S. financial institutions. And of course, what's good for U.S. financial institutions could be neutral or negative for other parts of the economy, for the productive parts of the economy. Ergo, we know that there's been quite a bit of deindustrialization since the 1980s, but Wall Street, as a shorthand, has been doing quite well, and it's not only in the States. So okay. The state, in short, is the political entity, the body politic that is best able to orchestrate these processes. Failure to do so will likely result in the diminution or loss of wealth and power to the state as well. Okay, so it's not just that U.S. oil companies will lose out if they're pushed out, and Chinese companies and Russian companies, or the oil producing states in the region develop the capacity to drill and refine their own oil more, or take higher owner, or nationalize that. That wouldn't just hurt the the capitalist part of it would also reduce, obviously, the strength and the revenues and customers for their security umbrella, such as it is, in that region. Okay, so that's his long, well, more, it's a whole chapter, but a certain to get to the gist of what he means by capitalist imperialism, and how they have to be understood, how the capitalist side and the imperialist side, or the capital accumulation side and the political side, have to be looked at in relation to each other, and that relation is marked with is not changes over time, has winners and losers. All that stuff is not a one and done, and can conflict. Obviously, the parts of the certain sectors of the economy don't have the same reaction to the policies of any state, typically. So the logic of territory and the logic of capital. So now he's going to flesh out more how these the dynamics and the contradictions between the capitalist side and the imperialist side, or the capital side and the state side. At any given historical geographical moment, one or other of the logics may dominate. The accumulation or control of territory as an end in itself plainly has economic consequences. These may be positive or negative from the standpoint of extracting tribute, flows of capital, labor power, commodities, and the like. But this looks quite different to a situation in which territorial control, which may or may not entail actual takeover and administration of territory, is seen as a necessary means to the accumulation of capital. What sets imperialism of the capitalist sort apart from other conceptions of empire is that it is the capitalist logic that typically dominates, though, as we shall see, there are times in which the territorial logic comes to the fore. But this then poses a crucial question. How can the territorial logics of power, which tend to be awkwardly fixed which are fixed in space, the nation state, predominantly in our period, respond to the open spatial dynamics of endless capital accumulation? And what does endless capital accumulation imply for the territorial logics of power? Conversely, if hegemony within the world system is the property of a state or collection of states, then how can the capitalist logic be so managed as to sustain the hegemon? So this is quite clear, because, of course, it's the nature of capitalism to expand, and to expand beyond the boundaries of the nation state. So capitalists, or capital, needs the state, but also reacts against the state. So the different spatialities and the different it's going to be a tension. So how does the nation state or collection of states manage to channel, to encourage, carrots and sticks, whatever, to encourage or command, if you will, or on to one on the side just to entice, and on the other side to command particular capital to do what it sees in the state's interests. So the right, and I want to just share this part because this is interesting and quite different from a Leninist understanding of imperialism. So the rise of bourgeois imperialism, Arendt, he's referring to Hannah Arendt here, but she asserts that the imperialism that arose towards the end of the 19th century was the first stage in the political rule of the bourgeoisie rather than the last stage of capitalism. So, of course, in Lenin's book, Imperialism, the last stage or the final stage of capitalism, she's saying no, it's the first stage in the political rule of bourgeoisie rather than the last stage of capitalism. So the evidence, so that's her take. The evidence for this is substantial. The first major crisis of capitalist overaccumulation, defined primarily as surplus capital lacking profitable means of employment, was the Europe-wide economic collapse of 1846 to 1850. that sparked bourgeois revolutionary movements with more than a hint of working class participation all over Europe. The partial incorporation of the bourgeoisie within the state apparatus thereafter proceeded unevenly across Europe. And he goes on to compare different cases, and also to make the case that, of course, you didn't have that so much in the United States, because the you didn't have a king or an aristocracy to kick out. They just had the native populations. All right. So moving on. So chapter 3 of his book is called Capital's Bondage. So it's a nice one, which basically is that even though it seems that what would be best for capital is just to go from money to money, so the idea, this dream of money reproducing itself, so capital reproducing itself without having to deal with all these frictions. But no matter what, it's still tied to the geography, and so it still has to deal with space and time. So capitalism survives through the production of space is a quote from Henri Lefebvre. And I don't want to get into this academic kerfuffle, but at this point in the book, I think Harvey says that he mentioned this, but he didn't elaborate on it. He goes on to elaborate on it, and then other people said, "Oh, actually, he did elaborate on it." And then Harvey was like, "Well, I didn't see that." Anyway, regardless, Lefebvre did also elaborate on it, but not the same way. Anyway, so what is that? So the spatial temporal fix is that capitalism regularly gets into what he calls crisis of overproduction. So you have whatever the current confines of the economy is, the capitalists are working in, or capital is working in. They have too much, and they're not able to utilize in a way that's profitable enough. So how do you get around that without devaluing the capital, or getting into large unemployment and other things that are socially destabilizing? Is you expand. So you can expand the markets, and it's geographical expansion and spatial reorganization that absorbs surplus capital. And so a big one of these, and one that he writes about quite a bit that I'm not going to talk about too much tonight, is urbanization. Yeah, urbanization, large-scale urbanization, sucks up a lot of excess capital, whether it be money capital, whether it be capacity, so copper, cement, steel, all kinds of stuff, labor, whatever. And so that's one. The Belt and Road is another one. All these corridors, all these industrial corridors, and anything that has to do with the built environment, so roads and bridges and sewers, and also all the stuff that goes along with the cloud and AI and all that stuff. So, of course, this also involves a temporal shift, so timing, because surplus plowed into long-term projects typically take many years to return their value to circulation through the productive capacity they support. So if we think about, I think, like the Belt and Road Initiative, or large urbanization projects, or we get, that you need innovations, or you need a financial structure that can deal with the time period it takes between getting all that built and starting to make enough money to be able to pay back the loan. Yeah. And so when you have things like roads and bridges and industrial corridors, unless people, you could like charge a toll, I guess, but how that goes is indirect. So it's the idea that to the degree that it's increasing productivity, or commerce, etc., that is how it feeds back into economic growth. That's how you get the value back from that's how the state would get the value back from its investments, or the investments it underpins in this. And this is how developers are able to organize the money to be able to get all the materials, build the large housing complexes, and then have to sell it enough. And then the hope is that you start to make money before you go bankrupt, or you have to have a bubble, or etc. Anyway, so there's a temporal dimension. So it postpones basically that the spatial fix is a great way for postponing capitalism to have to confront its endemic problem. So this is similar to Engels' quip that the bourgeoisie can't solve problems; it can only move them around. And so this is elaborating on that moves them around both in space and time through financing innovations and whatnot. And this also involves capital switching. So what does that mean? So the shifting of capital between the primary, secondary, and tertiary circuits. So in this understanding, the primary circuit is the circuit of production of goods and services. Yes, that's the primary circuit. The secondary circuit is the built environment. So housing, and so housing's one, but also factories and all the infrastructure that goes, all the social and all the infrastructure that goes in to industrializing, modernizing, innovating economy. And the tertiary sector here refers to government investing. So oftentimes so what we can know is that the road system, at least in most places, is not a patchwork of privately built and owned roads, but the government does that because the government has the capacity to do it, and there's kind of the natural monopoly argument. But anyway, so the tertiary circuit has to do with government investment into research and development, the built environment and whatnot. So the spatial temporal fix involves also capital switching. And so and all of this involves class struggle, of course, but not primarily between, in the aggregate, not primarily between capital and labor, between different configurations of capital and labor. Yeah. So for example, if the reverse perestroika is a useful analogy, and there is this understanding and this attempt to definancialize, or to have the financial sector, to have the banking and insurance and investment sector to be less of the economy, and to increase the productive economy, or the primary circuit. Obviously, people involved in the financial sector are going to have thoughts about that, and not just the big daddies and big mamas of like BlackRock and Goldman Sachs, but the people who the wage workers, the professionals that work in that. Just like there could be, just like when Walmart goes in, when the big stores, so like Walmart and whatnot, in the United States example, started to spread, and then Main Street and smaller shops started to go under. You can understand that the people that own those stores and the people that worked for them would have a shared interest, and not like maybe lobbying their city government or the state government not to zone a Walmart in their vicinity. And of course, regionally, so you could have regional class coalitions that are vying for the state to do one thing or the other when it comes to what spatiotemporal fix is going on. So it's the whole winners and losers thing that doesn't often divide nicely along or cleanly along capital and labor lines, but there's factions of capital, sectors of capital and labor, and of course, towns and villages that are going to have particular aren't going to have the same interests in terms of how this happens, and have different capacity to block it and lobby for how things change. So now, with that in mind, so with the spatiotemporal fix in mind, and capitalist-imperialist dialectic in mind, let's go back now and look more of Michael Every's reverse perestroika analogy. Is Trump trying to carry out a reverse perestroika. And what might that look like? And how violent and how much destruction is there going to be along with the creative aspect? All right. So let me find this again. Reverse perestroika. Where are you? Remove. Add. Here it is. Is that? Yeah. Okay. So take a drink here. All right. Sorry. Every once in a while, my mind goes a bit cuckoo. So, I think Tara. Oh, here it is. Reverse perestroika. I want to make that maybe even bigger. Yeah. Okay. Go away. Okay. Does this look right? Oh, good. All right. So, 2026, another year of American Revolution. So over the past decade, we warned about a collapse of the liberal world order. And this again is Michael Avery from Rabobank, which is based in Holland. In November 2024, we said the second Trump administration would shift from economic policy to statecraft with startling outcomes. We plotted out the Trump plan. The start to 2026 has been more explosive from Venezuela and Iran to Greenland and Gaza. Indeed, 250 years since the American Revolution, a new one seems to be taking place. Historical analogies to current U.S. actions can be helpful. Is U.S. neo-mercantilism, early U.S. neo-mercantilism, its latter imperialism, in 1913, the late 1930s, or the 1945 to 1991 Cold War are all valid. However, we argue a close comparison is 1985 to 1991. Trump is in many ways an inverse version of former Soviet President Gorbachev. Both superpower leaders introduced radical structural changes to shake up their political economy. Gorbachev failed badly. Can Trump succeed? And what does it mean if he does or doesn't? To answer this, we must briefly compare key fundamentals of the Soviet and US economies and what happened to the former. Now, I don't want to get too into this, but it is, why not? It is quite interesting. So, does this still look right? Yeah, okay. So the Soviet system, according to Michael Avery, okay, people, I can't, we're just going to take him at his word, right? The Soviet system was a centrally planned economy under Communist Party rule. It saw 5-year plans set by Gosplan, focusing on capital stock accumulation and military production. Again, capital stock I find so by that I find a productive capacity a more useful term. But all the stuff you need to make for your large industry, heavy industry, in particular, and military production. Gosnab issued allocation certificates for producer goods to state-owned enterprises. Gosbank, the central bank, made loans as ordered and monetized deficits and losses from state-owned enterprises. It ran multiple versions of the ruble, so cash, non-transferable, and trade, which weren't fungible, and 3,000 coefficient internal exchange rates. Capital controls locked liquidity in. State ministries refined the plans which state-owned enterprises implemented as output targets, with profit loss irrelevant as the system operated with soft budget constraints. All prices were set by Goskunsen, which rarely changed. There was no private sector, central bank monetary policy. So there's no private sector, no central bank, no markets or banking system as there is today. A state monopoly on foreign trade ensured few imports. The primary sources from the Soviet satellite economies paid in the valuta trade rubles, de facto hypothecated trade credits. Trade with the rest of the world was on a needs-must basis, and currency at artificially high fixed exchange rates. The labor force provided with a social safety net from health to housing, but was allocated work. Its savings flowed back to Gosbank. So you can find this report is available free online. I don't think I put the link in the description, but I will. But if you just do every Rabobank reverse perestroika, I'm sure you'll find it. I think it's on the Rabobank site and also on his LinkedIn, I think. So he's old school. Anyway, so this system saw rapid initial GDP growth rates while making the USSR a military superpower. However, a lack of market prices and structural inflexibility misallocated capital, while a lack of competition, market incentives, etc., undermined productivity and quality. Stagnation started in the 1960s with repressed inflation in terms of shortages of consumer goods evident. So enter Perestroika and Glasnost. President Gorbachev emerged as leader in 1985 with the remit to reform the system. In response, he pushed Glasnost with openness, so meaning freedom of speech, and Perestroika reconstruction as part of socialism with the human face. So before we had capitalism with the human face, we had socialism with the human face. Yeah? I don't know. Okay, so anyway, I don't want to go too much in night because we know that the Glasnost and Perestroika did not go well because it wasn't too long before this the Soviet Union was no more. Anyway, Perestroika proved too timid as a set of changes to have a positive impact on a rigid Soviet system. And then they had the shock therapy. I think most of us know the period in the 90s. With Yeltsin and then Putin coming to power and trying to do his own probably spatiotemporal fix, to getting a handle on the oligarchs and all the kind of things that were going on. So the post-Cold War globalization GFC USA. See, now he doesn't GFC. I'm thinking global financial capital. Anyway. So today's post, so let's just say, U.S. current economy, current global economy and the U.S. role in it, is not how many perceive it. Using the same fundamental framing as the USSR, we suggest that it is a free market system. So the U.S. is a free market system, but with no long-term planning or capital investment. So an atrophied military-industrial complex, despite being the military hegemon, and a Federal Reserve-centric system with U.S. Treasuries as the key collateral for the world. And in terms of, it seems odd to say that that when you think about the U.S. and saying that its military-industrial complex is atrophied. However, if you look at the Navy, for example, so not just the highfalutin, really uber expensive, crazy stuff that is sold and bought and sold, but in terms of all the ships and all the really heavy stuff. And I think I saw something where right now that China can, China can produce, let's just say an aircraft, I don't know what you want to call it, a battleship. Excuse my a battleship, an aircraft carrier, submarine, whatever, can produce that a lot faster and faster than the U.S. can. Obviously, because the productive capacity and the industrialization of China has been growing leaps and bounds since the 80s, whereas the U.S.'s industrial base has been contracting, not in all areas, but in many. So anyway, it has an open capital account as a necessity for the global architecture and de facto soft budget constraints as foreigners have to buy U.S. assets or the system topples onto them, and the government and Fed have to bail out the financial sector and key private firms. We see resulting financialization over productive investment. So they say that only around 20% of U.S. bank loans are for commercial industrial purposes and free trade, as the U.S. must be a net importer if the dollar is going to be the global reserve currency. Okay, so let's see. The state plays a small role in the economy. It's debatable. goods and services and prices are set by markets. However, asset prices are strongly influenced by the Fed. To prop them up is needed for the global system, requiring these as collateral. And we've seen that because it's just that they really don't want housing prices to go down, and they really freak out, of course, when the stock market takes a dive. There's free labor, but wages for many lag both productivity, high asset price growth, and sometimes inflation. And there's a small social safety net. This produces lower than past GDP growth despite innovation, rising affordability issues, wealth inequality, and political polarization. This all seems like a good description of the states. It also sees large fiscal and current account deficits and high and rising private and public debt. In geopolitical terms, it sees a decline in U.S. military industrial strength, so it can no longer fight two major wars at once, and not even one for long. And we hear a lot about this talk, and it has been since, I think, so with the stuff that we're supplying or selling, or I don't know what we're doing, giving and supplying to Ukraine, the stuff that we're giving and selling or giving to Israel, the stuff that we're using now in this crazy war with Iran. Yeah, you hear this talk all the time, like the stockpiles are low, the stockpiles are low, the stockpiles are low. You see the thing about, the overflowing toilets on the ship. I know how maybe that's a typical occurrence. But anyway, long story short, that you don't want to just look at the dollar amount that the U.S. spends on the military, but it's actual the quantity and the quality of its stock, in particular things like, in particular when it comes to the Navy. So in short, the system has not been performing as well in the past in many key areas. As such, Trump wants to shift the political economy from consumption and finance back to investment and military production. However, this is easier said than done. Okay, so he wants to make a capital switch, from the economy's become too financialized, too focused on consumption. We need to get back to consumption, and of course, this is going to be, and if they want to maintain this, the supremacy, in particular over their own hemisphere, but apparently still over maybe everything else besides East Asia, who knows? Gonna need to have at least their to be a coercive, our way or the highway type offer to those they want to either allow into their block, their security umbrella, or those they aren't willing to give that option to, one way or the other. Okay, so in short, the U.S. So it's widely recognized that shifting the U.S. from consumption and financialization and exporting assets like U.S. treasuries to productive investment and military production and exports of goods will be inflationary initially. This was also true for Gorbachev when he tried to move the USSR in the opposite direction, and prices of goods were liberalized while weak local supply met sudden pent-up demand. In short, the U.S. can't just overturn the global system it built around itself without suffering significant pain in the process. And we don't like to suffer significant pain. And to the extent that this is the understanding that Trump has and the Trump administration has of what they're trying to do, I don't think they probably wouldn't call it a reverse perestroika, but the fact that they're trying to make this transition, this spatio-temporal fix to the problems of to the oversupply, the overaccumulation problems the U.S. has. And what that means is that for a long time, in financial research, you hear about this wall of money. So there's a lot of money, but not a lot of, again, what they would consider profitable avenues to invest it in. And you have a lot of people investing in assets, so the housing bubble, and people just trading currencies back and forth. So there's a lack of investment in the public, in the productive sector, the productive capacity, in the built environment, and large swaths of the United States. And it's not just the United States, it's the UK and lots of other places. However, So the opposite of China, of course, which has been developing its productive capacity and it's a built environment, like, Grant through Richmond, to use a weird expression, a South expression that my grandma used to say. Anyway, and one of the things that I was thinking about when I was reading this report is that it seems that if this is what they want to do, they don't want they want to try to do it without having to suffer any pain or any political consequences through doing it. So it's like, so they do so Trump will do something, and then the stock market will react in a bad way, and then he often will, seems like they pull back a bit, or so it seems like he'll do something, they'll make some, like it would seem like really random comments, go full out and just kind of like bull in a china shop, and then once there's a little bit too much pushback, then they pull out. So I don't know if they have the political will to be able to suffer the pain that would have to, the growing pains, the transition pains that would require to shift the economy, the political economy, in this way. But we'll see. And also, of course, that when you have a system like the United States, you have elections. Yes, you have elections every, 4 to 6 years. And so if you cause too much pain, then of course you can be booted out of office. And if you're trying to go after, if the financial sector, if the financial sector of the economy, so the big banks and investment firms and hedge firms and all this, hedge firms, why does that sound weird? I'm saying it anyway. They have all kinds of money and they can do all kinds of ads and who knows what. So it'll be seen that once a certain sector of the economy gets really powerful, especially one that is global or largely global, we'll see what the U.S. administration or the Trump administration is really willing to do, or if they want to try to have their cake and eat it too, and then just kind of kick this can down the road. Because the high level of debt-based consumption and financialization of the economy, of course, can't last forever. And maybe there's the argument that we had the crash and the financial crash in 2008, and that they really haven't, the political class neither party has been really wanting to deal with that. So I've just been kind of, kicking the can down the road, hoping that, I guess, it all just, turns out, I don't know, or that AI will save us, or who knows. Okay. So step by step, reverse perestroika. So using our analogy, this requires a strong reverse perestroika. In line with this, Trump certainly seems to have a goal of capitalism with a national security face, involving a fusion of national security and economic security strategy. So a treasury-centric system with the Fed subservient, a neo-mercantilism in trade, so more tariffs and non-tariff barriers, export controls, de facto fragmented dollar system via stable coins and Bitcoin. So now maybe we're going to understand why the Trump administration is so gung-ho on Bitcoin and stable coins. It's not just about, a pump and dump with the Trump coin, whatever that is. Although, there's always going to be double dealing and corruption. Creating a new Warsaw Pact of ideologically aligned integrated economies, a new economic development strategy for other economies, where they want or not, think Venezuela, capital controls on outflows and moreover on inflows, soft budget constraints for key sectors. And what that means is that there's hard budget constraints. So if you don't make enough money, then you just have to sell off your stuff or restructure your debt or go bankrupt. Soft budget constraints, as I understand it, is that there's certain sectors of the economy and certain firms that, will be helped out if they're considered to be critical for quote unquote national security. So we're going to see more things talked about, more things being talked about in a national security way. So when it comes to supply chains, trade routes, transport corridors, that a lot of these things are going to be discussed in terms of national security, and that will put them under the umbrella of the Pentagon I guess. We'll see. So sorry. Take a drink. I lost my space. Okay. Okay. So soft budget constraints for key sectors with austerity for others, a state role in key sectors and free markets guided from financialization to productive investment. So here's the capital switch. Yeah. So we need to guide. They want to shift a certain amount of money from the financial circuits of the economy, so that are chasing interest and rent, and into the productive sectors of the economy. They're going to guide them. How they're going to guide them, we'll see, but that's the idea. So that's the capital switch in there. To productive investment, price controls, and also deregulation to reduce structural bottlenecks to growth and free labor, still with the small social safety net, but greater focus on affordability over welfare, while reversing net migration to raise wages. Okay, so maybe now the whole thing about scapegoating immigrants and the ICE thing isn't just for show. There's an economic reason to it. So we'll now move these in turn. So I'm not going to go over all of these. Let's see. Okay. Just a bit. Okay, so a little while ago, I don't know when, but they released the national security strategy. So even in this document, I'm gonna have to go read it now. States economic security is national security, and that U.S. actions will from now on be guided by this stance. While not a 5-year plan, and not having a buy-in from all stakeholders in the U.S. system, it is nonetheless a strategic direction answering what is GDP for? Okay, and so Michael likes this question: what is GDP for? It's like, all right. So what I would, in Harvey's term, is like, who is this spatial fix for? Why are we switching? Who and what and where is going to benefit from this restructuring of the economy, from switching capital from one circuit to another, or from trying to reduce the financialization of the economy and introduce the reindustrializing and all that stuff. So who, what, and where is that for? Make America great again. Indeed, the NSS states that to ensure that America remains the world's strongest, richest, most powerful, and most successful country for decades to come, until they wrote this, our country needs a coherent, focused strategy for how we interact with the world. And to get that right, all Americans need to know what exactly it is that we're trying to do and why. Well, I don't know. Unless the media is trying to undercut them, I don't think the Trump administration, at least in my estimation, but maybe I don't give them maybe I need to pay more attention to what they're saying in addition to what they do. That they've been quite clear on what they're doing and why they're doing it. Oh, what is it like? We're going to make America great again is not a full enough story for what you're doing and why. Okay, so a treasury-centric system subservient to the Fed. So a while back, some of you may have noticed there's this kerfuffle between the Fed, I think Jerome Powell and Trump, and now Powell's out, and there's somebody else has been put into that position. So the idea that the Treasury is going to formally that the Fed is going to still be formally independent, but it's going to take its cues from the Treasury. Yes, it's going to do more of the Treasury wants. So let's see. So in an era of fiscal dominance and realpolitik struggles for zero-sum control of critical supply chains, the return of the role of central banks and the effectiveness of traditional monetary policy is being questioned. It's not just the Fed. Politics looms over central banks everywhere. So we're going to see he would predict we're going to, we already have and will continue to see a more out in the open politicization politicalization of central banks. That they can't just be about whatever's best for the financial sector. Reverse perestroika logically requires Treasury control of the Fed, or at least to ensure it's ideologically aligned behind the national security strategy, even if it acts independently. Okay, so neo-mercantilism. So he also talks about soft budget constraints for key actors. So of course, there's current sectors and firms and places that are going to be, supported and encouraged, and other ones that are going to be, cut loose and left to wither on the vine. Good luck. Learned how to AI. Let's see, neo-mercantilism. So beyond tariffs, so we're not in free. We're not in free markets and free trade anymore. At least obviously in practice that was uneven, but officially also now moved into neo-mercantilism. So beyond tariffs and non-tariff barriers and export controls, the national security statement wants balanced trade. Yeah. So securing access to critical supply chains and materials, reindustrialization, reviving the defense industrial base, energy dominance. That helps to explain why they still want to maintain, of course, they want to maintain control in West Asia, and preserving and growing the financial, but also preserving and growing the financial sector dominance. So here's the confusion. Do they want to reduce it, or do they want to have their cake and eat it too? We'll see. Or maybe they think they can do both. Restrain it, but not shrink it. I don't know. The underlying aim is not just the balance of trade, but to establish control over global choke points and critical supply chains. So we see that obviously with the Strait of Hormuz. That, and now what was it that Trump came out with, it saying that you don't have to worry about, like, telling the shippers, like, oh, don't worry if you're about your policy going up, we'll escort you, and all kinds of stuff, which is asking for trouble. However, okay, raw materials will flow to the, okay, so here's the idea. This is in theory, like, what they want, or what he thinks they want. The underlying aim is not just to balance of trade, but to establish control over global choke points and critical supply chains. Raw materials will flow to the U.S. cheaply, priced in dollars, as in the new Pax Silica, while it retains the ability to deny those flows to rivals, as via Venezuela. These commodities must be processed inside U.S.-led blocks as inputs into higher value-added production rather than as profit centers of their own. So reverse perestroika therefore requires a structural, not a cyclical, so it's not a one and done, or just like, a policy change here or there, a global resorting of who is in and who is out of this block, this Pax America, this, protection racket. Cartel block, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Countries that wish to access U.S. markets will be forced to align their policies, or will benefit from lower U.S. tariffs. Those who do not will face significantly higher U.S. tariffs and will be excluded from these integrated upstream to downstream geopolitical supply chains and defense umbrellas. So it's the militarization, the securitization, the even more militarization, securitization of U.S. economic interests from upstream to downstream is how he's seeing it. So the Warsaw Pact, or Gorbachev forced reforms onto his Warsaw Pact satellites, which led to the collapse of their regimes before his own. In 1991, to be replaced by a globalized set of economies in what was once Russian space. Trump is trying to replace an open, values-based alliance. So let's think about what was that guy named Carney said at Davos a while back, and a globalized world with a more closed group of ideologically and economically linked economies and a deglobalizing world. So, all right. So, so the game of zones, the game of poles, the game of blocks is afoot. First, the NSS demands burden sharing and burden shifting from its allies. Okay, so this goes into the demand that NATO countries start paying more for their defense. Also pushing Australia, New Zealand, and all this. So basically, pushing all the quote unquote people who would be in this block or they would want to be in this block, who have had, you know, I don't know, anybody that buys U.S. weapons and anybody that has a U.S. base or military establishment on or near them, they're going to have to ante up more. You're going to have to pay more for that protection, baby. Your payment is going up if you want to have this. And of course, for some people, it could be a choice, but for others, not so much. Hence the Donroe Doctrine talk. At least what they want, what they get, and how it turns out, it's a different matter. So second, the U.S. is further trying to foster political economy changes in its allies. So whereas President Reagan said, "Mr. President, tear down this wall," to Gorbachev in Germany in 1987, in 2026, President Trump wants Germany and others to raise walls on trade, capital, migration, and against green policies. Okay, so maybe this is why he's always talking about trashing the EU's migration policies. I was thinking, like, why do you care, dude? But anyway, all right. So, indeed, the NSS, the National Security Statement, accuses Europe of presiding over its own civilizational erasure, such that it may not be willing or able. It may not be a willing or able U.S. ally. Okay, so a demographic litmus test. As such, it also backs cultivating resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations. Okay, so let's see. A new economic model. Okay, so what is it offering? So I guess apparently it's not just all sticks. There's also some carrots to what the U.S. is going to be offering those who are in its bloc, just because they're in the Western Hemisphere, or those they would like to retain or woo. So it also offers a broader U.S. economic model to others globally. So it states, the goal is for our partner nations, isn't that nice, to build up their domestic economies, while an economically stronger and more sophisticated Western Hemisphere becomes an increasingly attractive market for American commerce and investment. Okay, so it's a new, let's see, maybe it's a new development, a new Washington consensus or model. In short, the U.S. wants cheap commodities, but to also see their sellers move up the industrial value chain via industrialization. That's nice. And more trade at the margins, as Ricardian theory states, if they stay ideologically aligned. Okay, so they get so for these countries, like, this is what we want from you. So we want you to import this to us. We want you to import this from us. We want to export this from you. And as that's cool, then, this other stuff you can, develop, as long as it doesn't, upset the apple cart. We'll see. Let's see. The NSS adds, the choices all countries should face is whether they want to live. Okay. So here's the deal. The choice all countries should face is where they want to live in an American-led world of sovereign countries and free economies, or sorry, I didn't. So here's the offer. So the choice of all countries should face is whether they want to live in an American-led world of sovereign countries and free economies, or in a parallel one in which they are influenced by countries on the other side of the world. Okay, so I guess we have to put like sovereign with an asterisk and free economies. So sovereign and free in a way that is aligned with the America's national security, which is the same as their economic security. That requires logic. That requires logic. What? Okay, that logically requires increasing the carrots and sticks of the American model. Part of that will be an increase in U.S. FDI, so foreign direct investment, and the national security statement strongly supports from infrastructure
to critical minerals and communications networks, including export credit financing. This looks a lot like a U.S. rival to the China Belt and Road Initiative. So, who knows if this could all just be on paper as well, and they're making up as they go along, which is, sometimes that is what it is. But I remember reading this. I can't remember, in several places, so I think it must be true that Truman, I think it's Truman, that after World War II, when he gave out his speech at the three, about what the kind of American, deal to the world was, and the development thing that we're going to help the poor people of the world, the poor nations of the world develop, and we're going to make trade, not war, and all this type of stuff. That when he said that, at that point, it was all just rhetoric. There was no infrastructure apparatus behind how they were going to actually help, how they're actually going to develop the former colonies, or the soon-to-be former colonies, or the third world. But anyway, so this could be something else. They realize that they have to compete with, they also need to, to do the spatial part, the spatial fix, not just within the United States, but outside the United States, in terms of trade corridors and all the other built environment investment you need to do for whatever for this next generation, this next iteration of Pax Americana, or whatever they're going to call it. So capital controls. This is also interesting. The reverse Marshall Plan. So, the reverse Marshall Plan is that they want more countries to invest in America, whereas in the Marshall Plan was America helping, in particular, Western Europe rebuild after the war. But with strings attached. It wasn't just a gift. Reverse perestroika logically requires capital to be restricted from flowing where it's not useful to the United States, and to be compelled to flow in directions which are. So most notably, as part of the 2025 trade deals struck for access to the U.S. market, Trump has pledged FDI totaling $7.7 trillion from trade partners. In effect, the U.S. wants past trade surpluses run with it, plowed back into its productive economy as the price for the security umbrella over the Warsaw Pact over a Warsaw Pact in quotes that investment can rely on. Okay, so so instead of just buying T-bills or buying American debt, with the surpluses, they want their trade partners, or whoever's going to be a part of this American bloc, that if you want that you're going to have to invest a certain part of your surplus into building America. So, and finally, the dollar stable coins. So there's been a lot of talk, of course, about how the dollar's on death's door, how the dollar's reserve status isn't going to be the reserve status that much longer, that it's going to collapse, that it can't, the debt's too crazy, and that may very well be. But here's where the interest in Bitcoin and stable coins come in. We argue stablecoins are a U.S. geopolitical weapon and a logical tool in reverse perestroika. So if a foreign firm wants to hold a dollar stablecoin, a U.S. stablecoin issuer receives that country's currency and sells it to the relevant central bank for dollars, sends the dollars to the U.S. Treasury for a T-bill, then issues a stablecoin to the firm. The net result is dollars flow to the U.S. while the U.S. funds its fiscal deficit with T-bills at lower rates. Meanwhile, if an exporter to the U.S. is paid in stablecoins, it sends goods to the importer, who sends dollars to the stablecoin issuer, who buys a T-bill from the Treasury, backing the issuance of a stablecoin sent to the exporter. No dollar leaves the U.S., just tokens. So tokens based on dollars or backed up by T-bills. And the external holding of U.S. debt isn't increased. The U.S. can even demand the stablecoin is reinvested back into the US as part of a trade deal. Again, this notion of programmable money is they think is going to be a bigger deal. Okay, so, and they're arguing that as such, it's possible that dollar stable coins could potentially allow the U.S. to circumvent the Triffin dilemma that's the source of current U.S. financial strength, i.e. its exorbitant privilege and the euro-dollar, petrodollar power, yet ensures it can now reindustrialize as others must net export to it in order for that system to function. So, what does this mean more? U.S. stable coins. Using stable coins, the U.S. could logically expand its hegemonic network currency position globally, even as it isn't paying in dollars. See lower interest rates where others are higher as capital flows out, and the lower dollar rates onshore than off, maintaining the attractiveness of the stable coin. And even though they can't pay a yield, maybe they'll pay a fee. Greater fiscal space and recycled credit, in quotes, for productive capital investment. Meanwhile, non-allies, which the U.S. could be aiming to gradually decouple from, could be shifted to a neutral reserve asset such as Bitcoin, which the U.S. aims to build a strategic reserve of and has already seized from others around the world in policing actions. So what that would do is that would fragment, in theory, the current global trading and clearing system into different systems for different ideological blocks, as well as was the case under the Soviets. Okay, so basically what he's, so it's the idea that with this use of stable coins, they start using, if the U.S. starts using stable coins, that basically this is a way that could help it get around the current some of the riskiness and fragility in it being the global reserve currency. Okay, so I think that's that all I wanted to talk about. Okay, so all right. And also, I'm learning about this, and I'll have to have someone come on who knows more about stable coins. But this idea that's programmable, so they could, I guess, in theory, you could program and be like, okay, that let's say that if you sell your imports to the United States, that you get paid in stable coins, and that those stable coins have to be then used maybe to buy something from the States, or they're only good. Those stable coins can only be used within whatever the trade block is, whatever they decide to call it, the US zone or who knows what. So there's possibilities there, which of course means also that the people that are willing to trade in stable coins are going to have to be aware of the fact that those would be easy to control if you get on the wrong side of the U.S. government, which is not difficult to do. So we'll see. I don't know how attractive that would be, or how much people could be compelled into doing that. Anyway. So there's going to be a state role in key sectors. So logically, under reverse perestroika, the state must play a larger role in areas where the market has failed to do so. The U.S. has already taken stakes in Intel, steel, rare earth producers, and nuclear power, and is threatening to take stakes in oil companies, presumably to get them to invest in Venezuela. Moreover, the Pentagon the Pentagon Office of Strategic Capital is sent to pump $200 billion into innovations in the defense sector, allowing public-private partnerships. As a recent example, besides those in rare earths, the Department of War will hold a 40%. The Department of War, haven't gotten used to that yet, will hold a 40% stake in J.P. Morgan financed U.S. smelter joint venture to process Latin American metals. I haven't heard about that, but okay. So, indeed, leveraging in private capital via state stakes and suasion is a strategy that will logically be more broadly employed under reverse perestroika. So, okay. The same trend is evident in the Genesis mission. a dedicated and coordinated national effort to unleash a new age of AI accelerated innovation and discovery that can solve the most challenging problems of the century. Yes. Okay. So let's see. Price controls and deregulation. Yes. Failure again or success. Okay, so let's yeah. How long? Oh, I'm not going to read all of this. That's interesting. Okay, so failure or success. It's not hard. It's not hard to see why how reverse. It's not hard to see how reverse perestroika could fail. From an economic perspective, an issue is how much state control a market economy can take before it no longer is one, and we're still a long way from that outcome. Etc. Okay, but indeed, it is. Oh, so let's see. Sorry. So okay, and we're rather talking about setting the perimeter, which is setting the perimeter within which markets are encouraged to play with fewer restrictions. Indeed, if well managed, the likes of the offices, well managed, it's important here, the likes of the Office of Strategic Capital looks more likely to boost U.S. growth than hurt it, just as DARPA helped the U.S. grow in the past. However, the U.S. would have to convince a lot of disparate parts of the economy to act counter to their interests without taking control of them. As noted, the critical issue will remain the initial producer, then consumer, and inflation. So again, you can get some tariffs. It's like the limit to tariffs on their own and other non-tariff barriers to entry in and of themselves are not going to reindustrialize themselves. Okay, so a critical issue will remain the initial producer, then consumer, and inflation that will arise and how much whack-a-mole intervention occurs. Once the state starts intervening, it can be hard to stop, reducing economic efficiency. Okay, so politics, yes. Shifts in U.S. ideology and political economy are deeply disruptive to vested interests and offensive to some voters, if popular with others. Trump has to worry about the 2026 midterm elections and 228. Well, yeah, I mean, he has to worry about the 226. He can't run again. I mean, unless he's really gonna, try to do an FDR or something. But he's not looking good. He's looking kind of haggard, and he's 80 or 82. I don't know. Anyway, and who knows if, to the extent that this is a concept that they have, that they're trying to change the economy in this, they're trying to radically, or at least what seems quite a relatively radical reconstruction of the U.S. economy, and then which also, of course, it's geopolitics. Who would be the successor to that? We'll see. Okay. While he may not face a coup as Gorbachev did in 1991, he could be electorally defeated, but even that doesn't mean his successor may not continue with some of these strategies. Okay. So Trump also has to think of his geopolitical allies. They could opt to walk away rather than work with him under the terms he's setting. So you can think of this was it the Board of Peace, that a lot of countries that have historically been allies with the states did not sign on to that. Although I did notice that they were observers, so they haven't joined the Board of Peace, but a lot of them sent somebody to observe. I guess that shindig that had the opening conference or whatever it was a couple of weeks ago. Even if that hurts both sides more than simply acquiescing. Okay. At the same time, escalation from existing geopolitical rivals as well as allies could deliberately destabilize matters or perhaps accelerate the current U.S. policy direction. And so we'll see what happens with this whole, that from most people's point of view, debacle, what's going on in West Asia. So from Gaza throughout the region now, and them taking out Khomeini, and who knows what will shake out of this. If the Gulf states are going to be as willing to be as acquiescent to the desires of the United States as they were in the past. Now that it's been shown, at least if from what I've seen, that the U.S. has not been able to protect them or the U.S. installations in their areas. So what that means going forward, I don't know. And then you have someone in Israel talking now about how after Iran, Turkey's the next big target, because Turkey, of course, they're still trying to really, make greater Israel as great as possible geographically. So who knows? But anyway, I think obviously, and this is, don't have a crystal ball to say this, that how things end up being resolved with Iran and with West Asia more broadly is going to say a lot about the game of poles, or the what's going on with the China bloc and the U.S. bloc, etc. Because let's see. Okay. Okay. So he goes on about all the, about all the coin tosses and all the things that that could go wrong, and all that. But yet, if let's see, what is he? Okay. If reverse perestroika fails, there may be short-term relief for markets. Because again, this guy works for Robobank, and he is talking to investors and large business owners. So the point of this, the people reading this are like, okay, well, what does that mean for us, for our business plan, for our investments, etc. So he's not. So that's the audience for this report. So it could be short-term relief for markets. However, as Russia found out, there isn't an easy way to sustainably return to the status quo ante once a critical threshold has been passed within the system. And of course, he's talking about Gorbachev's Russia, not Putin's Russia. In the economy, okay. There isn't an easy way to sustainably return to the status quo ante once a critical threshold has been passed within the system. Things could also end with a bang, the longer and harder all this goes. In the economy and geopolitics, that would be in terms of inflation and damaged institutional integrity, and both trust once gone takes a long time to rebuild. Yet even if reverse perestroika fails, the evident conflating issues with the emerging threats to the U.S. political economic model are obvious, even to Trump's critics. What is the best way to restructure the U.S. system? So what is the best, or politically possible spatial fix, to use Harvey's language, for the U.S. system in the West to deal with China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, etc. Those awkward questions will still need to be answered, and rapidly, or else the U.S. system will still will be under great threat of stagnation or eclipse and then decline. But don't rule out success, he says. So, as noted, the historical and political logic argues for Trump's reverse perestroika to be much more radical than Gorbachev's, that both increases the risks of hard landing like Yeltsin, should it fail, and the likelihood of its success. So gaining de facto control of the Fed is key to allocating capital in the national interest at low rates of interest. And we know that he kicked Powell out, and there's a new guy coming in who apparently is, we would, if this theory works out, is going to be more, the Treasury and the Fed are going to be more aligned than they typically are. And perhaps bricks and mortar, or rather mortars, quantitative easing. It also allows soft budget constraints, even if markets react badly via yield curve model. Okay. Dollar stable coins would play a crucial role to prop up the dollar under any financial repression, as would a quote-unquote Warsaw Pact that accepts and even recycles them via a reverse Marshall Plan. However, that's all on the capital side. On the physical side, the Warsaw Pact, here's the production of space, and shifting capital and labor into the rebuilding of the built, into the built environment, broadly speaking, would also have to agree to more integrated and planned supply chains. The U.S. would also need physical control of commodity supply chains for itself, which of course backed up by the military, or who knows, what are those black something, who's that guy's name, Prince, who knows, outsourced, whatever. Anyway, commodity chains for itself, and to be able to coerce others into supplying it with key goods, even while it decouples from them, such as with rare earths recently, via threats to their economies. And we see this already with Trump. Whenever he's mad at anybody, whenever any person, it doesn't matter, a state official, a head of state, a politician, or someone from the private sector, they do something he doesn't like, he's like, we're not going to do trade with you. We're going to do a tariff with you. You're in this. You're out of that. You're out of the clubhouse. You're in the clubhouse. You're partially out of the clubhouse. So very much this weaponization, more overt weaponization of access to the U.S. economy and to expect its security services protection. All right. All right. Okay. I'm sorry. Logically, this radical combination could see reverse perestroika succeed relatively painlessly. Okay, I'm not okay about that. Sorry. Some of my highlights have gone away. Okay. If reverse perestroika succeeds, we will live through a volatile reverse of 1985-1991. Walls will go up, and an open world economy will shift to clusters of more closely aligned, more closed economic blocks. Yet within them, regulations may be torn down. Indeed, alongside huge disruption in supply chains, there will be ample compensating growth in many sectors, and potentially more balanced growth in many geographies. So that is Avery's reverse perestroika. Okay, so now to wrap up. Oh, it's going long. Let me add to stage. Okay, so bye, David. All right. So what to say here? So from Wall Street and Walmart. So from a Wall Street and Walmart focused economy, so finance and consumerism, or relatively cheap consumer goods, to protection and production. So industrial policy and trade restrictions as part of national security. So a securitization of industrial and economic policy, reshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring, strategic sectors over cheapest over what? Global sourcing. Financial flows become subordinate to material throughput and productive capacity, maybe. The production security environment, built environment, technology, military, AI, all that stuff. So energy is statecraft. That's nothing really new, but just maybe more overt than in the past. And we can see that now with what's going on in Iran, that I don't think it's all about Israel. I mean, obviously Israel might think it's all about Israel, or Epstein, compromat, or Satan, although, that could all be involved. But that, of course, everyone is the United States is not keen on being like, okay, well, yeah, we've been doing all kinds of things, all kinds of things in the Middle East since even before World War II, but in earnest after World War II. But now, whatever, we're done. We're just gonna make sure that Israel's as great as possible, and then we're out. Yeah, who knows? and the people are also talking about, I saw like how the damage that's been done. So all the damage that's been done to the bases and all the Gulf states and whatnot. And yeah, but we have to remember our creative destruction. Yeah, that it can all be rebuilt, and a lot of it probably needs to be rebuilt, because if the idea is that if you look closely at the status, the material status of all the U.S. bases and all the military equipment, all that stuff, that a lot of it is not up to snuff and needs to be redone anyway. And so, what are they going to do with that that proposed $1.5 trillion military budget? And would the Gulf states be able to say, yeah, no thanks? Or they could buy together. There could be, who knows? It's all a very open situation. Who knows what's going to be the result after this regional war subsides? Who knows who's going to come up on top, and how much leverage the U.S. Will have. And we could be looking at a very different geopolitical economy over there. Anyway, let's see. So energy is statecraft, obviously imperial part and pole. Yeah. What did I mean by that? Oh well. We'll see. So security, strategic sectors, the blurring of reindustrialization with national security. So strategic sectors obviously anything to do with high tech and AI, energy and defense. Reverse Marshall Plan. Conflicts will of course appear, because when that this is the nature of the game, that what you do to that a spatio-temporal fix to deal with multiple crises in capitalism that have to do with over accumulation are going to eventually cause other problems. Again, that these are structural, so they can be moved around in space and time, but they pop up again and again. And these are not, obviously, everything that's going on is rife with class struggle, both within capital and labor, and between and across different regions, and definitely across different countries. So crazy times. Oops, sorry. So pick your pole, or your pole picks you. So this idea, this game of poles, that's just the analogy that I'm using, is the idea that, are you going to be like, are you going to be aligned with the US mainly? Are you going to be aligned with China? Is there still going to be like non-aligned, like India is trying to, triangulate? People still use that term. In other countries. So is the U.S. going to, is the idea that, okay, like, China can be top dog in East Asia, but, we want the rest, or, I don't know, or China and Russia, and I don't know. There's Eurasia from like Eastern Europe over to East Asia, and then the rest is, the other block. I don't know, but we'll see. But of course, some countries have more choice than others. So resource endowments, corridor positions. So we hear a lot about, industrial corridors and trade corridors and shipments and all kinds of things. That the logistics, the logistic geography is going to be key, and there's going to be fights, both cold and hot, legal and illegal, and outsourced and direct, about all these things, in particular, starting with obviously the middle West Asia. Okay, so yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I said this already. So spatial fix, clusters, ports, corridors, and choke points. Yeah, lots of money is going to be. It's that the U.S. Was flat-footed, or who knows what they were doing, but now they want to have this, like, we're going to have our own Belt and Road initiatives, yo. Yeah. See. We'll see what they can offer, and if they're able to catch up to what China's already been doing. And if China will continue to allow them to cut them off from their investments. So, for example, Venezuela and Iran and other places that China's already has interests in. So, let's say, like, in the mining sector or whatever. If, or the extent that they had helped develop a part of Venezuela's oil sector, and now the U.S. is like saying, "No, that's thank you." You don't get, you're just gonna have to write that off. And if the U.S. can continue to go around and do that and basically say, "Look, now it's like you can either deal with us or China, but not both, or you can only deal. You have to give us preferential treatment, etc." How many people would be willing not to say no to that? And what is China able to do to give people a viable option, given that we know that the U.S. has no problem using force and other types of economic warfare? So, sorry. Stable coins, that's an interesting thing to me, that would be a way for them to get around them to be able to support the dollar being the reserve currency into the immediate future by going to stable coins quite a bit for what do you call that? As a clearinghouse, but whatever. So when people are for the imports and exports and in and out, the people importing and importing into the U.S., if they can make most of them use stable coins, if people would be willing to do that, then that gives them, of course, extra control and helps to finance this reverse perestroika. But I don't know if people would be willing to want to do lots of trade and programmable money that could be that they can't spend wherever they want, however they want. Okay, so that is that. So I think I found this notion of this analogy of the reverse perestroika useful, and particularly when you couch it within Harvey's understanding of his idea of capitalist imperialism and the tensions between that and the needs of the regular and the spatial temporal fix for dealing with overaccumulation problems. And I think that you can see that quite that maps on to the reverse perestroika analogy and deepens it and makes it of I don't know, it makes sense to me that there's something like this going on, that regardless if it doesn't matter if who the president is. I mean, it matters who the president is and who the administration is, obviously, but that there's structural shifts and problems going on that the U.S. is going to have to deal with, because you can't keep on this route, this debt binged consumerism and financialization, hollowing out the economy forever. Something has got to give. And what they're able to compel friends and foes and in-betweens to do, and to deal with their own internal tensions within the country, we'll see. Anyway, so that is what I have. Oh, sorry. Hide that. It's been going on forever. Okay. So thank you for tuning in. This has kind of been like a what would you call it? Workshopping a paper, because I want to write this up. This idea of applying Harvey's idea about the new imperialism in particular is understanding of the dialectic between, within capitalist imperialism, between the political side and the capitalist side, and looking at what's going on in the United States and in the West Asia, and also with China's Belt and Road as a huge, there's a global spatial fix, and within that there's regional and local spatial fixes that are going to come in tension to each other. So it's one way to help get an understanding of why we see all this conflict and craziness and lurching left and right going around. There's a lot of reconfiguration going around in the capitalist world. Not a lot of, at least that I see, not a lot of, there's still no signs to me that there's a switch on the global scale, the regional scale, moving past capitalism. And yes, I'm aware that China is ran by a communist country, but it seems to be that to date, that the best ran, the most successful capitalist economy is the one run by the Communist Party. So, there you go. All right. So please do consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for tuning in. I will add links to the reverse perestroika, to the wait a minute, that's David. Bye, David. Yeah. To the video description if you want to check that out. And I will leave it at that. Thank you, and take care of these crazy times. And I don't know about you, but I'm gonna try not to look at the news before I go to bed, because then I'll have another bad sleep night. Anyway, not that, poor me. No. Okay, Tara, stop babbling. Bye, everyone.